So let's look at some reactions with metals. So when a metal reacts with an acid, a hydrogen and a salt are always formed. Now, the first part of the salt's name will come from the metal that's involved, and the second part of the salt's name will come from the acid. So an example would be that if hydrogen reacted with hydrochloric acid, if magnesium reacted with hydrochloric acid, magnesium chloride would be formed, and also hydrogen. Another example is that if zinc and sulfuric acid reacted together, it would form zinc sulfate and hydrogen. And if iron and sulfuric acid reacted together, then iron sulfate and hydrogen would be created. Another example of that, here it is again, zinc and sulfuric acid would react to form zinc sulfate. The salt zinc sulfate, and the first bit comes from the zinc metal, the second bit, sulfate, comes from sulfuric acid. Now, in a reaction, you can describe it as a redox reaction if one of the reactants is reduced, and by that I mean it gains electrons, and if another reactant is oxidized, and by that I mean gains electrons. So in the reaction between magnesium and hydrochloric acid, magnesium will lose 2 electrons to go from magnesium metal to Mg2+. And because it's lost 2 electrons, that is the reactant that's being oxidized. Now, then the hydrogen in the reaction starts off as H+ in hydrochloric acid, and it goes to H2. Now that gains electrons. So if something gains electrons, it's been reduced. And therefore in this reaction, one reactant has been reduced and one reactant has been oxidized. So we call it a redox reaction. The reason it's called redox is because it's just the reduction and oxidation put together into one word. Redox, reduction, oxidation. Now, the chlorine ions in this reaction, Cl-, they're completely unchanged. And what we call them is we call them spectator ions. The reason is that they just spectate, they take part in the reaction, but they don't really change anything, they don't change themselves. So they just spectate as they go through, a bit like someone at a football match. So reactions involved in redox reactions, one of them will be reduction, and remember the other one will be oxidation. Now, which of the following is the spectator ion in this equation? So magnesium plus hydrogen ions plus chlorine ions goes to a magnesium ion and a chlorine ion and hydrogen gas. Now remember, the spectator ions are the ions that don't change. The only one here is the Cl- is present in both the reactants and the products. Therefore, that one is the spectator ion. Now, when acids are neutralized by bases, and base is just an alkaline that's dissolved in water, basically, metal carbonates, metal oxides, and metal hydroxides are the sort of things that we can use to do that neutralization. So, start off with metal carbonates. If you add a carbonate to an acid, what you get formed is salt, water, and carbon dioxide. An example of that would be if you added hydrochloric acid and calcium carbonate, that's your metal carbonate. What would get formed is calcium chloride, salt, water, and carbon dioxide. If you actually reacted an acid with a metal oxide, it would just form salt and water. So another example would be hydrochloric acid and magnesium oxide. That would go to react to form magnesium chloride and water. And if you reacted acid with a hydroxide, what you'd get formed also is salt and water. So another example is hydrochloric acid plus sodium hydroxide would react to form sodium chloride and water. How many products are there in the reactions between metal carbonates and acid? So if I just remind you, metal carbonates and acids form salt, water, and carbon dioxide. So 3 products are formed. What are the products of the reaction between metal carbonate and Acids, well, I've just told you, salt, carbon dioxide, and water. Reactions of acid with metal oxides. So if calcium oxide and sulfuric acid react together, they form calcium sulfate and what? Or H2O, that's water. The particular salt formed in a neutralization reaction depends on the acid and metal used in the reaction. The metal used gives the salt the first part of its name, and the acid used gives it the second part of its name. So if we just remember the example from above, we had calcium oxide and sulfuric acid. So the first part of the name gave us calcium, and the second part of the name gave us sulfate. So calcium sulfate was the salt produced. What would a salt be called if it was produced by reacting potassium with nitric acid? So that would be potassium nitrate. So reactions in which electrons are gained are reduction reactions. Oxidation reactions are reactions in which electrons are lost. And reactions in which both oxidation and reduction happens at the same time is redox reactions. So when acids are neutralized by metal carbonates, what is formed? Now remember, that's three things are formed: salt, water, and carbon dioxide. So remember, this is similar to what we just talked about. Reactions in which electrons are gained, that would be reduction. And reactions in which electrons are lost is oxidation. Reactions in which both oxidation and reduction happen, that is redox.